there, Leo listeners. Cara here from leolistening.com, where I help you understand fast-talking native English speakers through movies and TV shows. So I'm here today with Shanthi from English with a Twist, and I have brought her on because she helps business professionals communicate better in English. And so she's an expert with one of the things that's very topical at the moment, which is talking to people on Skype and Zoom and all these video conferencing platforms that we have to use these days as we're confined and we can't go anywhere. So Shanthi, do you want to add anything to that brief introduction?
Oh, well, about myself, yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, thank you. I'm a business English communicator. So I focus on international speakers to communicate better, but with the English they already have. And yes, virtual business meetings or virtual business conference calls have become much more prevalent now. So yeah, we've been focusing on that a lot with my clients.
Great. Okay. So let me get to my questions then. So have you got any, maybe not general tips, yes, practical tips about using Skype or Zoom? And I'm thinking here about, so there's a lot of technical things that can go wrong. So maybe you could tell us about what some of those typically are and how to cope with them so that you don't, collapse into a stress ball when you're on one of these calls in English, which is already stressful enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think preparation is key. Most people, apart from having to deal with working from home now, they're also having to navigate the tech. So few things that you can do beforehand would be, for example, if you're going to be hosting a meeting, send instructions, put together basic instructions to your participants. And, set it all up and send the email and send it 1 hour before, because people get instructions. So whether it's, for example, if it's Zoom, the link, and if they require a password, download instructions, download your app before you start, because most people, if they're busy, it'll be the last minute they start getting there and then start trying to download an app. So if you can just get some very clear basic instructions to them, then it reduces that stress before they even get on to it. Also give them basic instructions of what you want them to do during, so they join it and then mute their microphones. You might also want to explain the chat box. If you want questions, put through the chat box. So you can give them some clear instructions before. But also when you start the meeting, remind them again as they're joining to mute their mics, switch on their videos if you want them to switch it all on, and the chat box. Particularly handling questions. What happens on Zoom and Skype is, especially now, is people tend to talk over each other.
Right.
And that can be really frustrating. So if you want to set some guidelines of someone raises their hand or writes in the chat box, so it's even more important to set the ground rules and repeat it right at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, that actually sounds like what we've been doing for, so here your focus is the business context, but what we're talking about today could be for any context. So my mum said she had a big meeting on Zoom with all her sisters, which is quite complicated because she has a lot of sisters and she was on her phone and she made the mistake of one being on the phone where the screen is too small. She should really have borrowed my dad's tablet to be able to see everybody more easily. And also, for some reason, she was connected to her mobile data. And I was like, Mum, you're at home, just use the Wi-Fi, because Zoom, I guess we'll talk about Zoom a lot because we use it the most, but it uses a lot of bandwidth, I find. So if you're using mobile data, it's going to, gobble up all your mobile data, and then you'll have maybe no data left for the month or something. So there's those sort of issues to think about. And yeah, also with among the types of meetings that I'm doing, because I was kind of on Zoom all the time anyway before this, but we've started doing meetings. I'm in a group of climate activists, environmental activists, and we're doing meetings on Zoom now as well. So we've had to convert what we used to do face-to-face to Zoom. So, in those face-to-face meetings, if you want to speak, you put your hand up. And now on Zoom, what we do is we open the chat, and if you want to speak, you use the little star symbol. So you put that in the chat, and then it's somebody's job to follow, that kind of thread in the chat and just make a note. It was my job the other day. You just make a note of whose turn it is to speak next.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I mean, that's one of the things I also say is if you can have a facilitator in that meeting.
Yeah.
Also, if you're in a business meeting, you will have an agenda. And so the facilitator makes sure that nobody's going off topic. Yeah. Because with a virtual business meeting, people's attention span is a lot more limited. So consequently, and some people have meetings that can go on for longer and it doesn't matter too much. But in a virtual business meeting, you are going to get people who get distracted. So important to have a facilitator doing the tech, checking, managing the chat box. Because if someone comes in late, which inevitably you have, and then they start, fidgeting with the tech and you're hosting, that just becomes distracting, and everybody else is sitting there waiting for this person who's come in late. There are all the, very frustrating issues, and everyone gets impatient. So if you can get the facilitator to sit down the chat box going, leave the meeting, come back in, or deal with whatever, that just makes it less stressful.
Okay. All right. That's a really, really good point. Actually, I'm going to do a meeting like that tomorrow. It's a live class, and we're going to be 2 teachers. So one person's job will just be the chat box and managing that. And then my job will actually be teaching the class. And normally I manage all that by myself, but it's really annoying because you're explaining something and then you see something in the chat. So you have to have a look, and, it kind of interrupts the flow. So, okay. So that's so somebody whose job is just to manage that side of things. And I think muting yourself is a good point more generally for any type of meeting, even if it's just like jumping on a chat with a lot of your friends. If you're not speaking, you can mute yourself, and that avoids any problems with like echo or background noise, because I see this all the time. Inevitably, somebody unmutes themselves and then you hear like a screaming child or something.
Yeah. I mean, I've had, and especially if they're working from home, you are going to have the background noise going on. Maybe there's a husband or a wife who's working there, the partner, and you get all sorts of, but I've also had that where people have jumped into meetings and they were sitting in a cafe, not happening anymore. But, you'd have the espresso machine going in the background, and you're thinking, could you mute your microphone? As the host, you can actually mute everyone. So there is a facility on the chat to mute everyone if you need to. The other thing that I think also is frustrating for some people is when people don't switch on their videos. So there are some people who hide behind the video. And of course, it depends on the sort of meeting you're running. Because particularly with virtual business meetings, you need to see people because you don't have that physical body language. All you have are their faces. So one of the things I say is make sure you're close to the camera, because that's the only way you're going to gauge people's interest, their engagement in that, because it's so easy to just distract themselves.
Yeah, definitely. It was 10 times worse. Well, it's bad enough when people look at their phones during a face-to-face meeting, but yeah, I've had some really long meetings on Zoom, and I get very distracted, and it's obviously just so easy to go off and look at your email or open some browser tabs instead of paying attention. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've done that with the video on, but yeah, no, that's not that's not ideal. Although I was going to say, if Zoom is buggy, often switching your video off can help. So I mean, people could have legitimate reasons to switch off the video, but I think that's a nice point, that being able to see each other is really important right now. Although,
especially if you're speaking to someone in English, and English is your second language international, you want to gauge that they've understood you. Especially if you are the person speaking, you want to ensure, without constantly going, did you understand? It's just seeing whether they're engaged or not. And if you notice that maybe their attention is straying, to bring them back by maybe mentioning their name.
Right.
Without being, saying, perhaps asking someone, what do you think of that idea? Or, do you have any comments on that, or, question on that? And that brings them back into the conversation.
Okay. So checking on people, just, in case. Yeah. So I suppose, especially if somebody isn't contributing, you might think, well, are they not understanding? Are they checked out? Is there some kind of problem?
Yeah. But in a not a friendly, but in a welcoming, accommodating. Sometimes people feel nervous if they're put on the spot. Suddenly it's like, yes, do you have a question? It happens also face to face, and then you've got the person hiding. But if in a video conference, they can't necessarily hide in the corner of the room.
True.
They're there and they can be seen. Or perhaps just get the facilitator. Sometimes the facilitator, what they can be doing is gauging people's engagement, and maybe drop a line and say, I think so and so might have a question.
Right.
I think that might, maybe you need to clarify. So they can help you along. So there are many ways you can manage that, but depending on the size of your meeting, the number of participants.
Yeah, true. Depending on group size, because I'm doing something tomorrow where for a lot of the meeting people will be video off and muted, but we'll have the chat as a way to gauge engagement. Actually, I think it's really important to learn how to use the chat on Zoom for a bigger meeting where you can't have everybody on screen because there's just too many people. But the chat is a great way to be like, did you understand? Or let's recap or ask your questions. It's a nice tool. It's just making sure people know where to find it on Zoom, which can be tricky in the beginning. Well, I suppose that brings us on to, we talked about preparation. What about nerves then? Because obviously, if English is not your first language and you're going to be in a meeting, and especially for a business context, which is higher stakes than just hanging out with friends and family or something like this, is there anything people can do in particular to make it a bit less stressful?
Preparation is always key, and it really depends on how you're going to be participating in this meeting. So, for example, where you have been in meetings with, and the participants are people you already know.
Right.
And it could be that, I always say, reflect on who they are. There are going to be those who are easier to understand and others harder to understand. And I would say, spend a bit of time to say, the ones that are easier, why is it easy? What are they doing when they communicate? Maybe they're just slower. They pause. Right. They pause to listen. They ask you questions. The person who is harder, why is that? Is it because of their accent? Is it because they speak too fast? You don't have to spend too long, but you can just consider that. Now, the concern a lot of international speakers have is when they deal with native speakers. And I think that's one of the questions you had. Again, it's checking, asking yourself, why is it difficult? Are they speaking too fast? Inevitably, native speakers tend to speak too fast. One of the things you can do, first of all, is perhaps if you're worried about, oh gosh, I'm not going to understand everything, is if you can ask your host to record the meeting. Okay. If it's a possibility to record it. So even if you don't understand totally, if you're able to then listen back to the recording, and then, then that helps. Then it depends on the part, what you're doing. So for example, if in this meeting you are presenting something, so you're going to be giving information, prepare it beforehand. So think about what is your message? Why are you giving this information? To whom? And how do you plan to do it? And because on virtually, you're going to have to be crystal clear. So think about that, reflect on that, and then practice saying it, and then listen back to yourself. Don't be afraid of pausing, taking your time, because like we discussed earlier, people's attention span is a lot lower behind the screen. So don't worry about slowing down. pausing, taking your time. Similarly, if you're going to be answering questions, even if you can, maybe you're giving this presentation and then you have to take questions. What you could do is to ask those questions beforehand to the participants. Probably they've got an agenda. And so what you could do is email them and say,
Okay.
this is, do you have any, will you have questions for me? They might already have questions because of the agenda. So ask them to me email. So that way you're halfway prepared. You can anticipate the questions.
Okay.
That just helps you. If you're going to be asking questions, then think about again, if you can get the agenda and think about again, why are you asking the question? What is the question? Because at the end of the day, this meeting, there is a purpose for it. So if you can prepare that beforehand, that just helps you to overcome a bit of those nerves. So preparation is, those are the little things that you could try and do where you can prepare ahead of time.
Okay, to be ready for questions or the questions you want to ask.
Yeah, and the nerves, particularly you asked about native speakers, I always say to my clients, treat them like anybody else. They are not better or worse. In fact, sometimes they're worse communicators. So walk in there saying you have a job to do as much as they have. If they're presenting, they have to ensure that you understand. So consequently, if you don't understand, perhaps paraphrase what they've said, but never ever apologize for your English. So, treat them as equals.
Okay.
And that's what I always say to clients. They're not different from you.
Yeah, they're just people. Yeah, they're just people. Okay. On that then, if you do get stuck or for various situations, what are some key phrases that you might need to use in a Zoom meeting? I'm thinking things like, can you hear me okay? I suppose it's always good to start with something like that. Can you hear and see me okay? So that you're not presenting to a room of people who can't hear or see anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the beginning of a meeting, yes, absolutely. I think if you're running it, it's to just do the quick brief instructions. Everyone's coming on and then just, everyone okay? Can you see? You're having problems? No? Okay, fine. Can you hear me? All that, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have a lot of language. You just say, like you say, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Switch on your mic, switch it off, this sort of thing. Then as you're progressing, it's a question of, if you are giving information, as I say, pause. And if you want to check that people are following you, ask them a question. But don't ask the question of, do you understand? Because nobody's going to say they don't. They're just going to go, yeah, and then you have no idea. I always say to clients, why not ask their opinion? So, but don't say, what do you think? Because nobody's going to tell you what they think. They'll all go, nobody wants to say it. So maybe call on them. Say, Mohammed, what do you think of this suggestion? Do you think this could be applied in your situation? So it's asking them to be involved, what their opinion is. And that's one way. If you're asking a question, you haven't quite understood what that person is saying, paraphrase. So you say, if I understand correctly, this is what you're saying. And you're putting the burden back to them to listen back to you.
Right.
So I'm always saying, give that person the responsibility to listen back, particularly if you're talking to a native speaker. So where they've gone and spoken so fast, instead of going, I'm so sorry, I don't understand, my English is not good, which I always say, don't ever apologize, is perhaps asking them, may I, so I understand this correctly, you're saying this, and they have to then listen to you and confirm or correct. So that's and if they're speaking too fast, another thing is to slow them down, is to say, that's a really interesting point, I'd like to make a note of that.
Oh, that's a really good one. Okay.
So you're slowing them down.
Yeah, without interrupting or yeah, it's not as abrupt as kind of, oh, hang on a second, or okay. And it shows that you're paying attention. I like that. Same with paraphrasing. That's a great alternative to always asking, could you repeat that? Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that? Reformulating. And then I think the person will be quite impressed, because it shows that you're listening. And it also gives them, like you say, the chance to maybe realize for themselves, oh, actually, I was speaking too fast. I wasn't clear. It's not your fault. It's, like you say, the onus, as we say, is on me to reformulate.
Yeah, because I always say to my clients, communication is a two-way street. Most international speakers will blame themselves first as to any miscommunication. And it isn't the case always. It's a case of the other person also has to ensure. And if you feel that they're not, then encourage them to do so by gently, asking. If you have, for example, if someone's asking you a question and you haven't understood, then perhaps it could be a connection problem. Suddenly they've gone frozen. They're frozen. So you could say, and you could use that excuse. Sorry, my mic went. I just lost you there for a minute. Could you repeat that? Or I just lost what you were saying. And then they can come back in. Or, just say, if I understood you correctly, again, this is what you're asking me. And then they have to confirm or not. And again, there are different ways of doing this without immediately thinking it's your fault that you're not able to understand. If not, they can always ask it on the chat. Maybe they find it easier.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You could invite people to ask on the chat, and depending on how the meeting is organized, that might be what's happening anyway. But yeah, some people, this is even a native speaker to native speaker issue, or an advanced speaker to advanced speaker issue, because I find that in France, often people have a terrible habit of, like, before they even get to their question, they will like give a really long preamble. So like the question is right at the end. So actually, that it's not even really it's like I'm waiting for the question and it's not coming. So yeah, some people are just bad at formulating questions, and it's not even a linguistic issue at that point. It's just some people are not very clear, or they add lots of extra detail that we don't need. They don't get to the point quick enough. So
because a lot of people are doing their thinking as they're speaking.
Exactly.
So they're doing all that at the same time. So that's why I say, if you are going to be asking questions or you're going to be taking questions, if you can anticipate it, say, for example, you're giving a presentation or you're dealing with a project meeting and there are questions you want to ask because there are certain things or you're giving and these are the questions you're going to be asked. If you can prepare beforehand, and yes, and if someone is rambling because they're just doing their thinking as they're speaking, another way, I suppose, is, finding a way. How often I say to my clients, how would you do that in your own language? If you have someone rambling and they haven't got to the point, how would you deal with them? There could be a communication, they have a way, they have a strategy, they would do that. And I said, well, try doing it in English.
See what happens.
Yeah, because we all do it. There's always, everyone does that in English, does it in any language. Yeah. And what do you do to, so what your question was, so, just, yeah. Oh, my question. Oh, yes. What I mean to say, what I was trying to say was, oh, great. Thank you. We just spent 5 minutes getting to the question.
No, I like that. So a non-judgmental thing, like you say, we all do it because we're, even though we're supposed to prepare, sometimes things come to us and we don't have the time to get all our thoughts in order. So yeah, we're all guilty of that. So yeah.
And most business meetings, most people, they're running from one thing to another. They never prepare for the meeting, because people are just working. And so then they'll have about 5 meetings a day or more. So they're having to think on their feet. Yeah. So that's a lot of pressure. But also but the thing I say to my clients is, most often you're dealing with topics that you're already familiar with. So it's a question of, they tend to be repetitions. They're nothing new. Definitely. So it's, think back. And if you can record these meetings, is what is going on, what's happening. and, if you have a moment to think back. But most of the time you're repeating, what's been going on, because, most meetings you have probably 3 meetings to discuss the same topic.
Exactly.
That's
No,
business world.
the context is really clear. Yeah, I was talking about that with someone earlier, that, business meetings are one thing, but then it's more the informal side of things where it gets complicated, because then you're off topic, there's no agenda. You could end up talking about anything really. So it's a bit more stressful. So, okay, well, that puts it in perspective. That definitely makes it sound like it's something doable and achievable for everybody who might suddenly be doing more online meetings as a result of the working from home situation that a lot of us are in. So thank you, Shanthi. Those tips were really, really useful. It went beyond what I even wanted from you. So I'm really pleased. Just let us know before we finish off, where can we find you on the internet? Where are the best places?
All right. Okay. It's my website, which is englishwithatwist.com. And there I run my blog, and people can sign up. Also, I have a free mini course on finding coping strategies on how to communicate more confidently, or as confidently as you do in your own language, but with the English you have. So go onto my website and then sign up to my free mini course, or just have a look at my blogs.
Okay, brilliant. All right, well, thanks very much, Shanthi, and see you again soon.
Thank you to you, Cara.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.